and he has taken a very interesting journey to Fairy Tale Land, and of course he's exhausted now, and he needs to find a place to stay. The first place that he comes across is a B&B that is Granny's cottage. This is Granny from Little Red Riding Hood. He meets Granny. Granny's not quite what he imagined her to be. And things are going very strangely already, particularly when he is told that he must stay in bed until she comes and gets it in the morning. That she sleeps in until 9 o'clock, and he is to stay there until she comes and gets him. And by the way, she's expecting a visitor. So basically, he should just stay in his room and mind his own business. Very strange B&B practice as far as I'm concerned. So Onnie has now awoken the next morning at around 8:55 a.m. and sees a figure going past the window. Then he heard a loud knock on what must have been the front door, followed by Granny saying, "Come on in," instead of the familiar slow creaking sound of a front door opening. Onnie could hear the front door being kicked in. Then Onnie heard a loud voice say, "I am here to eat you, Granny, and I will have your stockings with rosemary sauce and a touch of garlic thrown in." Then Onnie heard Granny say, "Yes, indeed. Bring it on." It has to be said that the visitor, who was called Mr. Biggie Batty Wolfie Sr., had gone off the main script and was surely doing something called ad-libbing, and not to be outdone by Granny, who began to ad-lib back at him. Yet he never ad-libbed when it came to ironing his immaculate green suit, for he never wanted to see a single crease ad-libbing upon it. His crisp-looking dark green hat was worn with a tilt, and it all seemed to balance itself out with an addition of his lopsided mustache. On hearing all this noise outside his bedroom door, Onnie quickly got himself dressed, and while doing so, he looked over at the window for what would be a way out. But this fairy tale window had been painted so often in white that it was now stuck tight. Onnie could not stop his heart from pounding within his chest, especially when he heard Granny let out a terrifying scream that tingled and frosted the bedroom window. It was here where Onnie Piggles changed quite a bit, because for the second time in his life, he was going to do a strange thing. Yes, indeed, Onnie Piggles was going to use a bit of force, and sure enough, he kicked the bedroom door in. Then and there, Onnie saw a certain Mr. Biggie Batty Wolfie Sr. trying to drag Granny out from underneath her bed, and he had some nerve, for he was using her own 2 legs. Yet Granny was not trying to hide from him, but she was reaching for a broom she had strategically placed, and make no mistake, she was intending to sweep the floor with him. Within seconds, both of them were locked in a wrestle, and the broom handle knocking over everything around them. Now, it's not often one sees a broom making a mess, but that's what was happening. Without thinking, Onnie leapt on top of Mr. Biggie Batty Wolfie Sr. and Granny and separated them with a heave and a push. It was lucky for Mr. Biggie Batty Wolfie Sr., for Granny had the upper hand on him now with the handle of the broom placed down on his neck. Yet before anything else was said, such a story as this that involved a creature called Little Red Riding Hood suddenly came to an abrupt and sudden ending right then and there, and surely nobody wants a sudden ending to one of their favorite stories just like that, for that would be surely upsetting. For who would want a sudden and strange ending that now had the final image of Onnie Piggles' face contorted in his effort to separate both of them? Then that would be that, the end. But this is not the end, for Granny was shaking with anger, and if she happened to have a hammer, she would have broken the emergency glass that had underneath it a white glove for such occasions. Here she would have taken it out and would have slapped Onnie across the face, and then asking him for an early morning duel with her weapon called a pistol. Needless to say, Granny was a deadly shot, so it was lucky for Onnie that there was no hammer lying about on this particular occasion. Then Granny went over to Onnie and began continuously to tap him on the chest with one of her digits, and shouted very loudly at him, What did I tell you about staying in bed no matter what? She shouted. Yet for all her shouting, such a story had instantly gone out to the world. For that's the way fairy tale stories were made, and all done in one take. Then Granny looked around for her large frying pan, for she wanted to knock some sense into Onnie's head. And as she did so, she heard a knock on the timber frame of the front door. And there stood Little Red Riding Hood, and on seeing her standing there, Granny said, "You might as well come on in, Little Red." I will leave there.